want to play. And that's what we do, is we place our ads within the gameplay so it doesn't disrupt that experience. Anyway, well, John, again, thanks so much. Really excited to get into our conversation. I know really we went off on a couple of tangents the other day when we spoke. And like I said, I'm really excited to dive into that today. And one of the things that we talked about in a pretty deep way was the customer experience and how much that's been changing. Where do you think brands today are really, going from a customer experience, perspective? What have been the biggest challenges along those lines?
Yeah, I think our worlds are littered with many good intentions, but too often more of a short-term ROI focus tends to outstrip the good intentions that, and particularly as marketers or those who are thinking about kind of a complete customer experience, those tend to be longer-term investments. And I just see too often, I'm not speaking necessarily about myself, although I've seen that in my experience in the places I've worked, but in talking to peers across several industries, that very much in a world today where you can measure everything, that it's about now versus, Ted Rubin who was very involved in this community for a long time. His big thing was like, quit talking about ROI. Let's talk about return on relationship. And we need a healthy balance of that to make sure that we are absolutely, like in all of our actions, remembering that we're serving a customer, not just a shareholder or somebody a few levels above us.
Or a stakeholder, right?
That's right.
Always have to remember who your stakeholders are, consumers, and for most brands, I should say.
For sure.
And along those lines, one of the things that we talked about extensively, and we won't go deep into the cookieless future, but more so, I think that's really brought up, deeper conversations and thoughts from brand marketers in terms of measurement. And, what do you think the three biggest challenges that brand marketers are facing from, this new measurement world? I think that one of the things that you brought up that I really loved was that, your brand marketers are losing the crutch, or losing their crutches, was a term you used. So can you please share with everyone a little bit about what you think the three biggest challenges are right now for brand marketers in this new world?
Yeah, I don't know if I have three, but I have a couple of overarching things. The first is, as an industry, we've allowed great to get in the way of good. Because you can go measure a lot of things, we tend to overthink and overmeasure and not look at, talk to the customer. Like, what's that experience like? Like, if there was one measure you were looking at, it might be, it might be NPS or some sort of customer satisfaction score, along with obviously measuring, click through and efficiency performance metrics that we all have in this industry. But too often that side of the customer is lost. Secondly, so maybe there's two things. As we talked about yesterday, is you can't go to any conference or read anything on marketing without somebody or everyone talking about the cookieless future and, oh no, like the world is coming to an end. And I think the world's opening up for us as we lose, you mentioned this, as we lose this crutch of cookies. And I call it a crutch because it has been so good at tracking an individual or tracking, a browser or device that somebody's on. And we have shown through all this over measurement that we can drive really good returns if we chase people around the web with retargeted ads. It doesn't matter whether I really in market for something and I was really searching, or whether I was buying a gift for, shoes for my wife or something else, and then I get chased with those things. We as marketers have learned, and I'm guilty as well, that I look at the ROI on those retargeted ads, and the darn things work. They keep working in terms of driving that activity. And I'm excited, honestly, about losing some of those capabilities and forcing ourselves to do a better job at really being helpful for our customers. I found the third point was actually within the second point, And that's really about privacy that's involved in there. I think you and I were talking about the fact that you and I at the same point, I won't share all the details of it. You and I at different points have had the same surgery that a number of men go through. It's not non-life threatening, but it happens to some of us. And I had this earlier this year and came out fine. And what happens within 6 weeks of my surgery being over and I'm back to normal? I start getting ads for a class action lawsuit about not just this specific surgery, but the type of material that was used within the surgery. And went, wait a second, like, who has that data? Of course, I'm anonymized in so many places. I tell a lot, like, we do data and we target based upon anonymized data sets, but it was not common enough and too specific enough, and it felt horrible. And I don't know where the data ultimately came from. It could have been as benign as the YouTube searches I did trying to understand this, but I never got that specific, so that was interesting. But somewhere my data, some brand decided that my data, that the value of selling my data was more important than the relationship that I had with that brand. And I can't pin it down to one particular brand, but everybody in that mix. I've been back to see a doctor just very recently, and I told my doctor about this, and he was very much like, no, we don't do those kinds of things. And I said, maybe not, but everybody in that circle, I trust less.
Yeah,
now,
no,
there are times, right, that a customer can pin it down even more specifically. Is the value of their data, is that more for a short-term gain? Is that more than a long-term, that return on relationship with this customer? I certainly hope we don't live in a world where the former is true. Like, I hope that we will take this opportunity, like death of cookies, to better respect, our customers.
Yeah, no. Listen, it's and I think they talked about this in the last session, and from a retargeting standpoint, and consumers. I think consumers are becoming more savvy in terms of their data and what the value of that is and how much they want to share. However, at the same time, they don't understand enough about it to know why they're getting the ads or why this is happening. And so it's going to be interesting moving forward. And I'm glad that you view that as an opportunity, because I think it's a great way for us to redefine, and for you on a marketer side to redefine what the value of your advertising is, and how do you really engage with consumers in a positive way. And right. I guess from that, your last statement, and just in general in terms of the challenges, how do you think that's going to affect the messaging to consumers? Because ultimately that is going to, you're being challenged now in terms of how you communicate with your customers and prospective customers. So how do you think that's going to affect that messaging?
The quick answers that I hear from peers or agencies is, you're just going to have to get a little more generic in your messaging. Maybe some of the targeting that you're doing will go away, but you can still put your message out there, maybe in a more generic fashion. And I look at that and I don't know that I agree. I actually think this is a time for us to get back to some fundamentals. So we're talking about digital and fundamentals, but one of those fundamentals is content and SEO. One of the things I used to do in my teams, both at AT&T and then prior, was really looking at search patterns that begin with a prospective customer anonymously, right? Working with the Googles and the Bings and others of the world, but no, seriously, just from a research perspective, looking like when does a journey that ultimately I hope lands with someone buying from me, where does that begin? Where do they start kicking the tires? What kind of questions are they asking? Who are they going to as authority figures? Are these analysts? Are they YouTubers? Who are they? And if you look at search, but you just see a series of questions through a kick in the tires to a final purchase journey. I think the back to basics here is creating content that answers those questions, and not in a way that is, me, but a way that's truly helpful. So getting back to that basic of answering questions, becoming an authority, that's what SEO is all about, right? Becoming an authority on something such that while I can't track you around the web, which is a good thing, and see everything you're doing, I certainly can proactively place information that's accessible to you that is helpful. And then I earned the right. I earned the right to talk to you specifically about my business and talk about pricing and features and specs at the right point.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely an interesting time for sure in terms of how that all gets back to those fundamentals and really the new world that we're living in. What do you one of the things that we were talking about is what has made you most proud about your work at AT&T? I know you've been there for a considerable amount of time. You've got a great background in terms of brand marketing and years at Microsoft. But since you've been at AT&T, what are one of the things you've been most proud about in your work?
Wow, I've got tons of things in my head when it comes to things I'm proud of. I'm proud of the people that I get to work with. I think if one thing overall for the company is I am proud about how the company views diversity as a superpower. The last couple of years, we've been even more transparent about gender, ethnicity, how that's represented across the company, but very specifically through various levels of leadership. And that information is not flattering at every level, but the company and the people there and myself super committed to better reflecting how our customers are, how our communities are. And it's great to see changes. One of the changes that we really implemented over the last 3 or 4 years in marketing was really to better gender equality and removing old stereotypes. Very specific reviews and scores that we would put behind video production, for example. How are we representing men and women? Are we breaking stereotypes? How are we doing that with an ethnicity perspective, but not just in front of the camera, but also behind the camera? And take it very, very seriously, and would make selections on directors, on production teams, and our agencies, pushing everywhere we are, including ourselves, to really make sure that we were living, everywhere we could, that we were being diverse and respectful. I think overall, that's the thing I'm probably most proud of. There's so many fun things that go on with brand. We're doing a lot right now of simplifying things, and it's great. But honestly, a reflection of who we are, it has been the bit that really makes me excited and like loyal and devoted to being where I'm at.
That's wonderful. It's I think a lot of times with those questions, it's easy to fall back into the accomplishments and specific partnerships you've put together or campaigns you've launched or challenges you've overcome. But that was very genuine, and that's great to hear. I really appreciate you sharing that. One of the questions, actually, we just got a question that came up. I know we're not at the Q&A yet, but somebody popped it up, which is great, because thing was relevant because we were just talking about data. The question is do you feel like younger adults, 30 and under, are less concerned about data safety and sharing than older adults?
I feel like they are younger generations are a little more aware. But I don't know that I feel that they are completely open to it. One of the things I spend a lot of time with teenagers. I've been a scoutmaster for it'd be 3 decades probably, if I actually count it all up, but I think it's like 25 years and counting. And I've done that both with boys, and the best part has been the last few years with a group of girls. They've been so much more fun. Anyway, through my volunteering, I spent a lot of time there, and of course, like every young teen's like bringing the phone with them, and it's been interesting to talk about how they view things and what they accept. And more, I would say, certainly the last couple of years, particularly in the pandemic, where they're doing everything virtually, I've had some of the most interesting conversations with teenagers, and them looking at us and like throwing me in the thing of like, why are you okay like sharing all that on Facebook? Like, why are you okay with this? A bit of what I think is going to be a reckoning at some point. It might be, our grandchildren or great grandchildren who are asking the question of like, why did you create this mess for me? Right? Why didn't I have more control over my information, my profile? My daughter, who's in high school, I have to get very specific permission from her before I share anything. And I kind of pushed back on that initially as a parent, but no, I mean, she's serious. And I think that's good, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen other of her friends and other teams do the same things with their parents who, total stereotypes here. I'm bucketing everybody generations together, but are a little more loose in sharing without understanding it.
Oversharing.
I think that, I think next generation is going to force change. I certainly would love to see a next generation of thinkers that we are elected officials, because I think government, it takes a bigger role in this versus leaving it with private corporations and then picking on all of them for what they're doing right and wrong. But we're gonna get there. We have to get there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we have children, and it's we knowing the industry that we're in, they were probably the last to get on social media. We put it off as long as possible until they were the last one of all their groups, and I think it's important to give kids a break of electronics, or force them. When we're in our car, there's no electronics. When we're eating, no electronics at the table. And we both have a share joy of camping, and which we haven't done as much lately because our kids are a little bit older. But when we did go, there was no electronics allowed. It was just us spending quality family time together. And I think that too many adults or parents these days are too quick to give in to those impulses and let their children do that. And I think you have to really draw a line. So it's going to be interesting to see what the future holds from a data perspective and that next generation, for sure.
For sure.
One of the other questions, and one of the things that we're talking about, is that, how AT&T has adapted over the past few years. It's obviously been quite a challenge coming out of COVID. I shouldn't say out of, we're still very much in it. And, kind of what lies ahead. So how has that impacted your business, both from a marketing perspective, how you reached consumers and what messaging you had? And then where do you see things in the future as there's I think this is affecting consumer habits across the board because of how we're challenged in terms of dealing with COVID, and how that's affecting us, from whether it's being in person or shopping habits or the phone.
Yeah, a great question about where we see things going. We're fortunate, and I know a lot of other large advertisers and marketers are fortunate that you get an opportunity to work on early alpha releases of services, and certainly can participate in a lot of betas. But over the last several years, we have partnered really closely with some others, both on the data science perspective, as well as some advertisers that we would all recognize, to force a little bit of change. One example, Google, we were one of the key companies pushing really hard when it came to brand safety and transparency. And despite a lot of pushing from people like me about, hey, I really need access to that network, we were completely pulled back and spent very little to nothing with them for a really, outside of just core search, for a really, really long time, to create some change, to create some transparency that was important to us, but also important as, going back to your original question about customer experience, that we were more in control of the types of places where our brand showed up, with different advertisers and with different content. And I think that kind of example is important when we are looking. I think we need to look more often at our marketing and more often at our partners, and take a more holistic look at how we're treating our customers. That's the biggest point. We've done lots of things when it comes to data science. We're exploring a number of things. We've been involved in esports. I know your company, where you're doing, we completely recognize this is a huge untapped opportunity. I forget the actual number of impressions, but this point has stuck with me, is on a daily basis, there are more people, vastly more people involved in sporting online. Gaming, you may not call gaming online, maybe that's not a sport to you because somebody isn't throwing a ball, whatever. But from an esports perspective, there are more people on a daily basis that you could reach contextually, like you talked about,
Mhm.
than there are on one day of the year at the Super Bowl. And what do we do as marketers? It's the Super Bowl. It's one day. And we know like TV viewership is down, maybe sporting, some news times, kind of break it through. But we really need to look at where people are and hopefully not do the slimy, I'm going to, full, screen takeovers. Like I think those days are gone when we're like, I'm going to buy the Wall Street Journal today. And I'm going to force everyone who comes there for news to look at my ad. And I'm not going to give them a way to get out of it. Whoa, isn't that great? No, that's wrong, right? Like that's bad customer experience. How can you be
Yeah.
contextual and how can you go where people are? And gaming is massive, massive.
Yeah. Yeah. There are 3 billion gamers, and there are an equal amount, they're spending an equal amount of time in social media as they are within gaming. And it truly is an untapped market for brands right now, because the disparity between the spend between gaming and social media is somewhere to the tune of about 2 billion to 78 billion, some maybe 75 billion in that range. But more importantly, I think what, not only the contextual, but the engagement, I think, within gaming is really different, because when people are immersed within an experience like gaming, whether they're, playing a game, watching somebody else play a game, they're fully engaged with that without other windows being open, a million tabs, other screens. They're really in that. But the bigger challenge that we've overcome, and that I think from a gaming perspective that you touched on, is the fact that it needs to be immersed into the experience as opposed to disrupting it. And that's right. As a gamer myself, and I stopped playing games on phones for a while because it was just so annoying. And one of the things that I think is you're going to see is a much more immersive experience from an advertising perspective, to where it's more in the background as we experience it in daily life, as opposed to thrown at you and you can't escape from it. So when you talk about a consumer experience, you want to make sure that it's the right experience for your brand, and you're not forcing it on somebody, but you're more inviting them into it. So thank you for pointing that out, because I appreciate that. But I agree. I think it's a great opportunity, and really, they touched upon it earlier, and that's the metaverse. And I was reading a story the other day that 38% of consumers even know what the metaverse is, but yet that's sort of the web 3.0. If you look at like Ready Player One, the movie, if anybody saw that, that's really kind of where the whole experience is going with the Robloxes and the Fortnites and the gaming platforms, the metaverses. And that's the nascent, that's sort of the next generation of where we see things going from a consumer experience, and from I don't know if I want to say an internet or from a web experience, that's really kind of where folks are headed, and where the industry is headed.
Yeah, you're in the right space. This is one big area where people are going, and too many still look at it as, oh, those are young gamers. Well, all those young gamers are like middle-aged,
with
good amount of disposable income, and they're your business decision makers and your influencers and everything else, right? It's definitely mainstream, and definitely something to look at for sure.
Yeah, and it's definitely overlooked. And I think what's also interesting is the fact of people that are spending time playing casual games that don't consider themselves to be gamers, yet they spend a lot of time playing games. So it's what the definition of what a gamer is per se, I think, has changed dramatically, to your point exactly, which kind of rolls into, and I know we touched on it and talked about it, but I love your perspective on this. And that is, what do you think that the new model of digital is? I mean, we talked about the metaverse and so forth, and obviously I have my vision, and we have our vision, but from a brand marketer standpoint, where do you, let's look 5 years down the road, which in, digital is an eon, but, where do you see as the next sort of opportunities from a digital standpoint for brand marketers?
Yeah, my answer may surprise you. I think the new model of digital has been done before. In fact, I'm going to call the new model of digital is the net. The net. This is a card that was sent to me. I'll put up. People kind of see the card that was sent to me on the back. Really looks handwritten. But the net sent this to me when I received my latest road ID. So anybody who's a runner or out backpacking, or I'm a big cyclist, you get these, they get them engraved with your information on them in case something really bad happens to you and you can't speak or something. And It can call your loved ones and get you to care. But a very common thing that people use. Anyway, relatively small company, but everything this company does, and they're completely digital. It's completely an e-commerce storefront. I've never met any of their people in person, but I know Nanette, and I've held on to this for months because I was so impressed that from their website and how they talked, a little bit of what happens around them in social, how I like configured my little really simple wristband to the packaging. And then Nanette tells me, like, you know, her celebrity crush was Mark Wahlberg and Katy Perry. Her favorite flavor of popsicle is orange. Her guilty pleasure is chocolate covered pretzels. Like, you could look at that and be like, that's kind of silly. But then her handwritten note is she says, you know, I hope your new gear empowers you to do more of what you love, and a little bit more. Like she said, I've only been here for a couple of years now at this company, and I love it. That, even if this is mass produced and, you know, Nanette is a farce of my imagination, or, you know, some made up thing. I hope it's not. That would like just blow it in my mind. But seriously, like I do use this very specific tactile example of what the future of digital, the model should be. We can do things at scale. We can reach people in contextually relevant ways. We can create content that really answers their question, but bringing it all together and making it a human to human connection is super important. I get offended when people will call me a B2B marketer, mostly because I've done all types in my career. And I guess technically I do business to business marketing, but it's not. It is, Nanette is selling to me as an individual. And I would love if Nanette went to another company and it was buying some advertising product for me as a professional. I would totally talk to Nanette. I would offer to take her out to dinner versus her having to buy me the dinner. And I mean that real. Like, the more we can make this a human to human interaction and realize that people are not targets that we, you know, like look at with like some hunting, you know, periscope, but they're people, and we can answer questions, we can earn loyalty, and we'll sell far more to them when we treat them that way.
Yeah, no, listen, I speak to a lot of brand marketers, and I got to tell you, I mean, they really view this opportunity right now in the marketplace from a measurement standpoint at really sort of blowing up the old model of how we are targeting and why we are targeting consumers, and that we shouldn't be looking for the next cookie solution, that we need to redefine what measurement looks like and where and how we communicate with customers, or how you know, from a brand marketer's perspective, how you communicate with your customers. I think it's got to be authentic. It's got to be native. And I think, you know, we talked about the up and coming generations. And I think that for them, you know, they understand the nature of, authenticity. And as a brand, if you are not speaking to them authentically, and if you are not committed to the same things that they're committed to, or at least express that, you know, you're supporting the causes that are important to them, they're not going to buy from you. It's very important. And so I think that, you know, taking all that into consideration as we move into this new world, really, what is it that, you know, is relevant for those consumers, and how do you engage with them in an authentic way from a brand perspective? So thanks for sharing that. I thought that was really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're going to go to question and answer. If anybody has any questions, feel free. I know that we're bopping up against the time here, so feel free to throw those into the Q&A. In the meantime, I know, you know, John, one of the things that we talked about, which I really loved, is and you mentioned the fact of, you know, this personalized messaging being more contextual, and but I think one of the things that I really liked from our conversation yesterday was that, you know, you've got to be more patient as a brand to have consumers come to you. And, you know, getting back to those, you know, fundamentals, you know, what has been the biggest challenge along those lines as we've moved into this new phase of really, you know, reaching those consumers in that way?
Yeah, I don't, patience is an interesting word. I don't know. I may have used that before. I'm not a very patient person. But I do believe, as I was saying, that it's a matter that the shift is a matter of us answering questions that we have the tools to find out the kinds of questions that people are asking. And instead of going, okay, I like that one, I'm going to just answer this, and then I'm going to buy you your, I'm going to buy your screen elsewhere, it really goes back to answering those key questions. And yeah, that takes some time, like building authority through content, like just good old fashioned, if there's such a thing, good old fashioned content marketing, still works. And it will reign again when we have maybe no cookie, maybe no replacement, as you're talking about. Certainly, certainly Google and others are going to try and do it. Apple's going to do it in their own, their own kind of walled garden way, even though giving us all the option now. Like everybody's built, the internet's been built on us sharing or not being aware of what we're sharing, and we get content for free. You've seen the death of so many newspapers, classified ads that used to keep all those things going.
We were talking about that, yeah.
Right? They're completely gone. And what replaced that was our personal information that we maybe were aware that was being merchandised and sold. We're certainly more aware of it now. But what's the next model? I'm glad I'm not in the content business. I've got something else to sell. But that changes this whole relationship that people will have with the content providers and the platforms where we're trying to tell them about our products and services.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one quick last comment. I mean, without great journalism and without great content to engage consumers, it eliminates a channel for you to be able to communicate to them. And as a J school graduate, it's disappointing to see the demise of quality journalism and newspapers. But hopefully there will be a resurgence. I know there certainly has been some good outlets that I follow, but I know they are far and fewer between these days.
Yeah, I will steal a line that I hear on the daily all the time, and they say, "Look, podcast, right? If you love this content, you can support us by subscribing to the New York Times." So whatever it is that you're whatever it is that you're consuming that you find of value, go and support them, because those things they're struggling, and we can support them. So
and they're
there's my PSA.
There you go. Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, Marissa. I mean, I honestly, it's really what dives into and digs into those deep stories that are important to society. So it's to see some of that eroding is disappointing for